In this video, we are going to review order of operations and work some examples that contain fractions. So in section 1.1, we learned the steps for order of operations, and we talked about that in the past you may have learned PEMDAS to help you remember the order of operations, or maybe you learned it as please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. But the P for parentheses can also mean other grouping symbols. So step 1, you're going to work the innermost grouping symbols in your problem. And it may be parentheses, could be square brackets, could be absolute value bars. Okay, so grouping symbols first. Second, you're going to do any exponents that are in the problem. Third, multiply and divide. Now remember, those two are grouped together. You work from left to right. You do not always multiply before you divide, just whichever comes first in the problem. And then fourth, we do the addition and subtraction at the end of the problem. So I know we've already done some examples with order of operations in 1.1. But those didn't have any fractions in them. So that's why we're coming back to this topic. Now that we've gone over operations with fractions, let's try some of these. Also, you need to remember with order of operations, when there's a big fraction bar like there is in this problem, then you treat the numerator as if it's in parentheses and the denominator as if it's in parentheses. So you're going to do all of that stuff on top. You're going to do all of that stuff on bottom, and then the very last step will be to divide using that fraction bar. So let's look just on the top. We've got addition, we've got division. We know that we need to divide first. So let's make a note of our steps over here again. So we've got grouping symbols, exponents, multiply and divide left to right, and then add and subtract. Okay? So we know that the division comes before the addition. Now we are dividing by a fraction, and the rule for that is to multiply by the reciprocal. So I'm going to bring down the 4 plus 3, and then I'm going to change my operation to multiply, and the reciprocal of 1/7 is 7. If you flip it, it becomes 7 over 1, and 7 over 1 is equal to 7. Okay, let's go ahead and go to the bottom. And we've got multiply and we've got subtract. So multiply comes before subtract. So let's do the 2 times 9 would be 18. And go ahead and write down the minus 3. Okay, let's move back up to the top. Addition and multiplication. We know we need to do the multiplication first. So keep the 4, keep the plus, and 3 times 7 is 21. And then on the bottom, we can finish that up and do 18 minus 3 is 15. And back to the top, we add and get 25. So you don't have to keep those parentheses that I wrote on there. You can certainly if you would like, but you have to work the problem as if they were there so that you get down to just one number on the top and one number on the bottom. And then you're going to check to see, can I divide the top by the bottom? But 25 is not divisible by 15. So the other thing then that we need to check is, can we simplify the fraction? And yes, the top and bottom are both divisible by 5. So if we simplify, it becomes 5 over 3. And that is our final answer. Let's try another one. So this one does have grouping symbols. It has some parentheses. So we need to work inside the parentheses first. And in our first set, we've got addition of fractions. In our second set, we've got subtraction of fractions. Now remember, when you're working with fractions, addition and subtraction require an LCD. You cannot add or subtract without an LCD. But if you ever need to multiply or divide, you do not need that LCD. Okay, so to add we do. Let's look at our denominators, 4 and 2. The bigger one is 4, and 2 will divide 4. Therefore, 4 is going to be our LCD. So we're going to make 4 as the new denominator for both fractions. And if you wanted to, in the same step, you could go ahead and say, okay, I'm going to need an LCD here as well for 3 and 2. So I start with 3 and 2 won't divide 3. Next multiple is 6. 2 will divide 6, so that's going to be my LCD. And now we have to figure out the numerators. So I'm going to switch colors here. All right, now this one didn't change. It was already 4 on bottom, so the top is not going to change. Or again, you could think of that as multiplying by 1. On the second fraction, I need the 2 to become a 4, so that's going to multiply by 2, and then the top times 2 and 2 times 1 is going to make that a 2. All right, let's look at the 2/3. The bottom turned into 6, and so to make 3 into 6, we multiply by 2. Top times 2 and 2 times 2 will make this a 4 on top. And then our last fraction, the 2 became a 6. That means it needs to multiply by 3. And on top, we've got 1 times 3. So the new numerator there is 3. Okay, so inside the first set of parentheses, we can now add the numerators together. 3 plus 2 is 5. And we keep the common denominator. And then in the second set of parentheses, we're going to combine with subtraction. So for the numerators, 4 minus 3 is 1, and then we keep our common denominator. Now these are multiplied together since there's no symbol between the parentheses. Multiplication. And remember over here, multiplication does not need an LCD. However, the nice thing about multiplying is if you have any common factors between top and bottom, you can go ahead and divide those out. But in this case, we do not. No common factors between 5 and 4, or 5 and 6, or 1 and 6, and 1 and 4. So then we just go straight across. 5 times 1 is 5, and 4 times 6 is 24. And that is already in lowest terms. So if you know your rules well for adding and subtracting and multiplying and dividing, then these should be pretty easy. Let's go ahead and keep practicing. Okay, so let's look at our operations. First operation's addition, second one is division. So we know that in order of operations, the division comes before the addition. So we're going to drop down that -4/5. And I'm also going to drop down the +3/10. And then to divide, I change the divide to multiply and flip, or take the reciprocal of this second fraction in the division. Okay, so now I'm going to do the multiplication. I can check for common factors. I don't have any. So I bring down the -4/5 plus, and I multiply straight across, 3 times 9, and 10 times 2. Okay, now I'm down to addition, and that's where I need to have a common denominator. So let's look, we've got 5 and 20. Let's start with the 20. Will 5 divide 20? Yes. Then 20 is the LCD. So we put that on the bottom of both fractions. And on this second fraction, since it already had 20, we do not need to change its numerator. On the first fraction, to turn 5 to 20, we need to multiply by 4. And so on top, it's -4 times 4, -16. Okay, So now my operation is only in the numerators. Negative 16 plus 27. Signs are different, so I need to subtract 27 minus 16, and the sign of the larger is positive. So it's positive 11. Keep the denominator. This is already in lowest terms, so 11/20 is the answer. Make sure, especially in these order of operation problems, that you're writing down each step nice and neat down your page, and bring down any part of the problem that you're not using yet so that each step, notice we're putting an equal sign, is equal to the step above. Okay, let's try one more. This one has some parentheses, but there's no operation inside that needs to be done. We do have an exponent, so the exponent is what we're going to do first here. If you needed to come out to the side and do 2/3 squared, you could. That means 2/3 times 2/3. Multiply straight across gives you 4/9. Now there's another way you can do it using an exponent rule. And I know we haven't covered those yet, but some of you may already be familiar with those. And there's a rule that says if you have a fraction with an exponent, then the fraction can go on the top. The exponent can go on the top and on the bottom. So then I do 2 squared over 3 squared and get 4/9. Same thing as what we got the first time. So either way is fine. Let's come back to our problem and bring down everything that we're not using on this step. Keep that minus is out front. It is not inside the parentheses, so it does not get squared. It just comes down. And then the 2/3 squared equals the 4/9. So now I have multiply and I have subtract. We need to do the multiply first. And that's the special one, where if I have a common factor, I can go ahead and divide that out. That'll help the numbers to be a little smaller. So we do, because 18 and 46 are both even, we know for sure they're divisible by 2. So I'm going to divide 18 by 2, which will become 9. I'm going to divide 46 by 2, which will be 23. And now multiply across. 1 times 23 and 9 times 5. And then we bring down our minus 4/9. Now we need to subtract, which requires the common denominator. So I look at my big one and ask myself, will 9 divide 45? Yes. Then 45 is my LCD. The first fraction already had the 45, so it stays the same on top. The second fraction, to make 9 become 45, needs to multiply by 5. And that will make the numerator 20. Then the operation in the numerators. 23 minus 20 is 3. Keep the same denominator. And then check to see if you can simplify. And you might not recognize this, but you actually can, because 45 is divisible by 3. Remember our rule, if we add the digits, 4 plus 5 gives us 9, and since 9 is divisible by 3, then 45 is. So we can divide top and bottom by 3, which will give us 1 over 15. And that will be our final answer in lowest terms. Okay, this concludes all the videos for section 1.2. Be sure and work all the homework problems and let me know if you have any questions.